And what up, you guys? Welcome back to Fro Publications YouTube channel. It's me, Rich, your anti-fascist comic book nerd, curating comics for your enjoyment as well as empowerment. And we're still going through MAUS. We're gonna read chapter 1 today, and really peep this out, man. Dissect kind of the thoughts and feelings that I get from reading this first chapter. Again, I can't implore this book enough. Get a copy, read it. It sounds like a lot of local libraries have it available. I love this intro, this two-page little intro. Because what I feel like Art Spiegelman does very well in this section is that he communicates this trauma never leaving his father, and that trauma always hanging over him as a young man his whole life. Because what you see here in this section is Art Spiegelman playing, and his roller skate kind of gives out on him. And his homies are like, ha ha ha, they're just playing, they're kids, you know, they don't know no better, so they just bounce out. But homeboy's hurt, right? And he's like, my father was in front fixing something, being frugal, because that's one thing that I think we don't talk enough about. Like, people that have had hard lives, like, you know, they deal with the trauma of poverty. But this has already come to hold this a minute while I saw. He's like, why do you cry, Artie? Hold better on the wood. He's like, I fell and my friend skated away without me. He stopped sighing. Friends? Your friends? Huh. If you lock them together in a room with no food for a week, then you could see what it is, friends. And like, think about how eerie and chilling that is. The idea that like, you would only know who your friends are if you were all locked in one room starving together. That's dark. And I don't doubt that a lot of the concentration camps, that was the reality. You know, like they were starving people to death. And so then whatever food there was for folks to consume, you know, if you were able to get a handful of food, you shared it with your most trusted and loved. And, you know, that obviously wasn't everybody. Very, very dark and chilling, right? And that's the opening sequence to this comic. And so then it's chapter 1, right? And this book is called My Father Bleeds History. It's from the mid-1930s to winter 1944. And then the second book is the other half. But we're on 1. Let me go ahead and move some of my art supplies. Alright, you guys, here we go. So first of all, I've always dug this art. This is an art style that I've always tried to replicate. A very minimalist approach, but does a lot. And I think because a lot of the heavy lifting is done by the storytelling. And one of the things that this does off the back is like, it sets a lot of the characters and kind of like where they're at emotionally, right? And so this is the beginning of it, and it's basically Art Spiegelman showing up to his father. His father is saying, Mala, look who's here, Artie. He was remarried. Mala knew my parents in Poland before the war. She was a survivor too, like most of my parents' friends. So for me, that just indicates like trauma bonding. Like no matter how far the father gets removed from that trauma or that era of his life, it's something that he always goes back to, and it's something that's a part of his psyche. And he can't escape it. And that's why, going back to that first 2-page spread, it's like it even, you know, influences the way he speaks to his children, the lessons he tries to teach them. Because although he survived the Holocaust, probably in his mind he assumes that there's another Holocaust right around the corner. And here you see that the father's a little bit kind of a despicable character, right? The dinner's on the table. Mala, a wire hanger you give him? I haven't seen Artie in almost 2 years. We have plenty wooden hangers. And then Artie adds, they didn't get along. But this section here, Art Spiegelman's father asks, like, how come your wife didn't show up? And it almost gives you the feeling that like she might not like him. And again, it's because the father's kind of being portrayed as like this character that was not very loving and kind of hard on the palate. But that's what trauma will do to you, right? Especially people that carry their trauma on their sleeve, just like the father does here, right? And you know, it talks about some of the more peripheral aspects of it, like his father had 2 heart attacks, his mother died of suicide, like all this background information that kind of sets up this story as it progresses, as Art Spiegelman hears it from his father. And so then he asks them, like, how did you and my mother meet? And the father begins this story about who he was and what he was up to, and how he had this lover named Lucia, and Lucia really enjoyed his company and all that, but that it just didn't pan out. And then one holiday season, he went to go see his family where they're staying at, and his cousin introduced him to who would become his wife, who was Art Spiegelman's mother. One of the other key aspects that they emphasize on this is that his mother's family was well off, that they were millionaires. It's emphasized on multiple occasions, right? Right here, right? This is how they introduced the character, right, of his mom. It's like, she's incredibly clever, from a rich family, a very good girl. And then here goes this one, right? Mom wasn't that attractive, huh? Not so like Lucia, but if you talked a little to her, you started loving her more and more. And here goes another one, right? Here goes this panel. He's like, the Zeilerberg family was very well off, millionaires. And he goes to talk about their money and where it comes from, right? The Zeilerbergs had a hosiery factory, one of the biggest in Poland. But when I came into their house, it was like a king came, right? He's like, to see what a housekeeper she was, I peeked into Anja's closet. Everything is neat and straight, just the way I like it. But what's this pills? I wrote down every pill. If she was sick, then what did I need it for? Later, a friend, a druggist, told me the pills were only because she was so skinny and nervous. And then basically it goes on to say that he abruptly disbands his union with Lucia, and that Lucia's heartbroken, doesn't feel well about it, and ultimately goes and talks to Anna, Art Spiegelman's mother, and they have kind of this spout of like, because Lucia puts it in Anna's head that you have a lot of girlfriends and that you're marrying me for my money. Art Spiegelman's father, Vlad, kind of like assures her that that's not the case. And this is the other part that I really like about what he does in this first chapter, is that he kind of communicates the idea that like there's certain things in this book that aren't going to make his father look good, that probably won't make his family look good, but that he's going to be honest and transparent with the story as it's told to him. And that's this part here, because the father tells him, he's like, but this what I just told you about Lucia, and so I don't want you should write this in your book. And Art Spiegelman's like, what? Why not? He's like, it has nothing to do with Hitler, with the Holocaust. But Pop, it's great material. It makes everything more real, more human. I want to tell your story the way it really happened. And the father says, but this isn't so proper, so respectful. I can tell you other stories, but such private things I don't want you should mention. Art Spiegelman says, okay, I promise. And that's the ending of the chapter. So some of the main points in this chapter that comes to light is this idea of like trauma bonding, that no matter how far removed people get from trauma, like they carry it, and it infuses itself in every decision that they make and every relationship that they have. And so like even him being remarried to someone that, according to Art Spiegelman, that his father Vlad cannot seem to get along with, but they're bonded together because they're both Holocaust survivors, and they share an experience that nobody else in the universe will ever share again. Hopefully no one else can share with them again. And that's kind of the sad thing, and that's one of the things that I feel like Art Spiegelman does really well in this book, is that he communicates that his father was a broken man, and that his father had suffered quite some bitter trauma, and it made it so that by the end of it, even if his father is not the most likable character, you definitely understand the character, and you understand that what he went through could not have been easy, and that the fact that he came out on top and was able to still have a family and still for the most part do right by society is a miracle in itself. And then you understand, you empathize with the idea that the mother, on the other hand, could not overcome that trauma and could not get herself enough space to breathe, that she ultimately ended up taking her own life. And those are some of the points in the stories that come later, but like it's definitely very dark and thematic, but it makes sense to set the narrative of like, this is the situation that Art Spiegelman's father walks into, ultimately does Nazi Germany, and like the rise of fascism in Poland, and like everything that comes after. This idea that he was just married, just met this woman Anna, not the most attractive but very intelligent, and that she was from a rich family, and he was also a well-off businessman. And the reason why that matters to the story, as you see as it progresses, is because they leverage that in order to stay alive and to survive while others cannot. And so it goes back to that same thing of like, you're able to insulate yourself with money. But that's the end for chapter 1, you guys. As always, we'll be reading this book to its entirety. So if you guys are interested in reading chapter 2 with me, I will be back here tomorrow for that. All right, you guys, thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, subscribe. And guess what? I do this shit daily. So see you then. Lights.